What's up, Sooner Nation, and welcome to another edition of the WhackoReview Podcast, where we go over all things OU football from the previous weekend. I'm Steve Curtis, the voice behind Wacko Sooners, and the Sooners are 5-0, and we are ranked number 6 in the country coming into Red River Rivalry Week. Try saying that 3 times fast. But we've got plenty to dive into, right? Oklahoma's dominant 44-0 win over Kent State, John Mateer's injury situation, and the likelihood of his return for Red River. And finally, Texas's fall to the Florida Gators there in the swamp down there in Gainesville. We're going to break it all down right here on Wacko Sooners. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell button so you never miss an episode. Also, remember, you can go follow us on all of our socials, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter X, all at Wacko Sooners for live news updates, game time highlights, and of course, a few memes and funny reels to keep it fun and lighthearted here like we like it in Sooner Nation. So go hit those follows so you always stay in the Wacko loop. So, first things first, Sooner domination. The first shutout of the year. What should have been the third shutout of the year, honestly, if we hadn't turned the ball over in our own turned the ball over in our own region of the field, That darn John Mateer throwing those interceptions close to our own end zone. Come on, gotta get rid of that guy. Let's get rid of him, right? Second shutout in the Brent Venables era here at Oklahoma in his 4th year as the head coach. I want to start off this segment of today's Wacko Review. First of all, prayers out to Keontez Lewis and his family, and of course the whole team, knowing how tight-knit our unit there in Norman is. Took a really hard hit early in that first quarter, ran right into the brick wall there at the north end zone. It looked like he kind of hit the side of his head, but ran into that wall, was down for quite a while. He had to be carried out on a stretcher on the golf cart. And reportedly, so good news, reportedly he was walking around during initial checks there in the locker room. He was still taken to the hospital. All x-rays came back negative. It's been reported negative for breaks. So medically speaking, there's no damage or traumatic damage or terrible damage. He was able to feel all of his extremities, his limbs. He was coherent. So great signs there. The way that Venables put it in the post-game presser was, I imagine it's like being in a car wreck. So while all that news is good, do expect that he will not play against Texas next week, just with the nature of the injury. Or not even the injury, just the hit. Just probably not going to feel great for a while. I'm sure we will hear more about that on Tuesday when Venables and Arbuckle have their pregame or preview interviews with the press on Tuesday afternoon. So let's break the game down stat-wise, all right? Oklahoma, we had 355 total yards, 170 pass, 185 rushing. I liked that. We know how much of a rushing attack I wanted. Then had 23 first downs, and we were 7 of 13 on third. So let's talk about the offense here for a minute. So Michael Hawkins Jr., starting quarterback this week with John Mateer out with his thumb injury. Mike was 14 of 24, so completion of 58.3%. 162 yards, okay. 3 passing touchdowns. I can work with that, especially that first one to Satania where he kind of rolls out, avoids getting sacked, and just heaves it down, and Satania jumps up, catches it. Thought that was great. Great elusivity or elusiveness, depending on what term you prefer to use. If the first one isn't even a word, it might not be. But looked great in the passing game. In terms of, well, actually no. Great's probably not the word I want to use. It looked adequate. But 162 yards versus Kent State. Now, granted, we didn't have the ones in the whole day. Fine with that. But you still want to see a lot more out of that. And it's a little concerning to me that we didn't have Hawkins go for at least 200 and that his completion percentage was not 65 plus. It was 58. He looked very nervous at times and uncomfortable. So there were drives where he looked cool. He looked calm. He looked collected. He looked like himself against Auburn last year down there at Auburn. very composed, trying to make all the right decisions, making the right decisions, not even trying, just looking good, making good decisions, getting the ball out clean, great. There were other times where he looked a little bit nervous, dancing around on happy feet, not totally sure what he wanted to do. Overthrew a little bit here and there, overthrew Ivan Carrion, who's a giant. You can't be overthrowing your giant guys like that. You can't be doing that. One thing that I heard over the broadcast was, since I was at Texas, Florida in Gainesville this weekend instead of in Norman for Kent State, but hearing on the broadcast while I'm watching Florida beat up on Texas, I'm hearing, this guy, he's only got one speed on the ball and is bullet fast. Yeah, he just shoots it in there. Doesn't put a lot of touch on it. So hopefully we can clean all of those things up this week going into Red River in the event that he starts over John Mateer, depending on John's injury recovery. Mike also had 9 carries for 33 yards, 1 touchdown. I'm actually okay with that. That's fine by me. I said that I wanted a bigger rushing attack, and I didn't want Hawkins going crazy. I wanted to see Hawkins be primarily a passer with a little bit of a run game, and I wanted to see most of the rushing be done by the running backs, which we will get into here in a little bit. Some key guys that came back this week, Eli Bowen, who we talked about, true freshman All-American corner last year. Looked fantastic. Of course, a little bit rusty, have to clean some things up, but that's to be expected with how much time he's missed coming in almost mid-season, or in the middle third of the season, starting the middle third of the season. Coming back, looked good. One thing that has me a little worried is Cortland Guillory, our shining sun, who we all know and love, our true freshman corner, and I don't say that with sarcasm. We do love Cortland Guillory, absolutely. But he got flagged again yesterday for pass interference after getting 2 or 3 of those against Auburn 2 weeks ago. So at what point do we pull Cortland and say, here, take a day off or take a day out, kind of, and or not even take a day off, really. When are we going to see those things cleaned up? Because we're having a true freshman starting at corner. We need our starting corners to not get those a lot. And one day against Auburn, where he was on an island against Cam Coleman or Eric Singleton, I give so much grace for that, because those guys are fantastic. But in terms of, hey, you're getting flagged for PI on Kent State, you should be good enough to where you aren't in those kinds of positions and you can still keep them from getting the ball. So at what point do we put Bowen in with a little bit more experience over Cortland Guillory, especially with a matchup against Texas wide receivers this Saturday? And we will talk about this later as well, Texas's entire performance. But there were plenty of times on Saturday where Texas receivers were wide open and running free, and Arch just missed. We can't be allowing that in the event that Arch figures out how to throw the ball more accurately. So are we going to put in a more experienced guy in at corner over our wonderful true freshman because it's cleaner? That's one thing that I wonder. I think it will be interesting to see that dynamic. I think we'll at least see a good rotation between all of our great corners because, again, we've got Eli Bowen, Cortland Guillory, Gentry Williams, Devon Jordan, and that whole room is absolutely amazing. And looking back on it, I remember in the spring transfer portal, I wanted us to go get a veteran corner to come in the event that we had another problem with Gentry's shoulder. However, so far, we haven't had that issue come up, and these young corners that we have are stepping up and performing well. So I'm overall actually rather impressed with the cornerback room. That is the most impressive unit to me this year so far. Giovanni Gibson also returned wide receiver. He emerged throughout spring practice as wide receiver 1. Got rolled up on next to last practice of the spring, broke his leg the same way that Kendall Dolby did against Tennessee last year, at a much less detrimental level. He missed the last 5 months just recovering. He did play a bit on Saturday. He had 1 reception for 5 yards. That's fine. That's fine. It's Kent State. We don't need you to go crazy. I'd like to see him get out in space more next week against Texas. I'd like to see a lot more of that. since he is one of our bigger receivers. I'd like to see some more pushes downfield from Arbuckle. If we can make that happen, I would love to see it. Because remember, I grew up mid-2010s, late 2010s, Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts, Spencer Rattler, Caleb Williams even. I like flashy Oklahoma offense. Now, do I need to see the flash all game? No. I just want to see it some of the time. But again, that's just a fan. That's the fan in me saying I want to see that. As for the run game, we're going to talk about that a good deal here. Troy Blaylock, 15 carries, 78 yards. Okay. Now, the cherry on top for me, and it still did not measure up to my expectations of this matchup, Jaden Ott, 11 carries, 49 yards. Going into the Kent State game, Jaden Ott only played against Illinois State, Michigan, and Temple, and had a grand total of 9 carries, 17 yards. Jaden Ott, more than, I think, pretty close to triple. Yeah, he more than tripled, I think, his yards this week. Because let's see, 17 times 3, right, is 30 plus 21, 61. Okay, he didn't quite triple it, but he performed well for the amount of carries he was given. And I really liked his power. I liked his patience. I liked how he moved. I think as the season progresses, with a Blaylock-Ott combo, having those two do most of your running work for you, we're going to see some good stuff out of this run game. I think the offensive line, now, of course, still Kent State, but I think the offensive line did a better job of creating gaps. And this was without all of our starters in on the offensive line either. So I'm very optimistic about that. I know I said I wanted tons out of Jaden Ott and Torrey Blaylock. And seeing action from X-Rob, Taylor Tatum, even if he was healthy, turns out he's still dealing with a hamstring injury. And, of course, Javante Barnes. Javante Barnes did not play at all yesterday. Or Saturday, excuse me. So I think it's something to trend positively towards, not to go all in on yet. We'll see how it develops. Jaden Ott also had 2 receptions for 10 yards as well. So a bit of a pass-catching threat there as well. Very glad that the rushing attack was very back-based as opposed to quarterback-based out of Michael Hawkins, because Hawkins only had those 33 rushing yards and the 1 rushing touchdown. I want to see more out of the run game, though. And when we get to talking about Texas and Florida, we will get into why I think that's possible. So the run game in general, looked better. I like how we tried to use it more. I thought the play calling on offense was a bit vanilla, which, again, that's how we felt about the game against Temple and the game against Illinois State. And I love how our schedules worked out. We've had cupcake, big game, cupcake, big game, cupcake, big game. Or bye week between Auburn and Kent State before going into a big game against Texas. So I want to see us develop our run game more. And ideally, we will have John back next week instead of Mike. And that's not a knock on Mike. That's just, I think John will be a bit more dynamic and will add a bit more to the rushing attack and make us more dynamic and less predictable. The passing game looked good, as always, minus Hawkins' nerves and his happy feet and his sidearm throw. That wasn't very pretty. That's not going to work all the time. But Isaiah Satania led the team in receiving yards again. 3rd game in a row. And Jaron Kanik, I believe, has surpassed Bauer Sharp in terms of receiving yards. So Bauer Sharp, as Oklahoma fans know, probably one of the most hated players in Oklahoma history. But Jaron Kanik went ahead and surpassed Bauer Sharp's receiving yards in Game 5 of the season. Bauer Sharp, at the end of 12 games last year, 324 yards. Jaron Kanik, through the first 5, 328. And Jaron Kanik, or at least going into this weekend, was leading all tight ends in receiving yards in the nation. I would be shocked if that is still not the case. Isaiah Satania, again, led those receiving yards, and I actually had to go pull that up here. He walked out of this game 4 receptions for 75 yards and 2 touchdowns. So we love ourselves some Isaiah Satania. And Jaron Cannett looked great. Deion Burks looked great. Of course, Keontae Lewis going out wasn't ideal, but it is what it is. As for the defense, 13 tackles for loss. 4 sacks. 4 sacks. Including our first turnover of the year. R. Mason Thomas and his strip sack against Kent State, picked up by Grayson Halton and taken in for a touchdown, which they were asked about that after the game. Oh, yeah, the last turnover that Oklahoma had last year was a strip sack by Grayson Halton, recovered by R. Mason Thomas for a touchdown at LSU. And Saturday it was reversed. Grayson Halton took that in for a touchdown teed up by R. Mason Thomas. Love those guys. Love the defense. The defense has been fantastic. They've played lights out all season. Danny Okoye, sophomore edge rusher, had a great sack all by himself. Another interception, or another turnover, our first interception of the year by Jaden Hardy. He got inside on a little slant route and picked that off. So we went from having no turnovers so far through the first 4 games to having one of each against Kent State. And you saw the excitement from the team, and you could hear it in the stadium over the broadcast. Just absolutely fantastic. Love to see it. Everyone was just losing their minds. Oh my gosh, we got a turnover. Let's go. Then got plenty of the young guys in. Plenty of the young guys in to play as well. Plenty of rotation. And that's building that great depth, and I think that'll serve us next week against Texas as well. And forgive me if I've been in and out for a second. I've actually been trying to find those tight end stats. And it would appear that Jaron Cannett is no longer leading tight ends in receiving yards. He is sitting here at a comfortable 2 among tight ends. Number 1 being Baylor's Michael Trigg, and I will not complain about that too much because I am also a Baylor fan by definition. But I digress. Let's get back to the defense. Apologies. I should have looked that up earlier in preparation for tonight's recording, but here we are. Back to the defense. Plenty of young guys got rotation. It helps develop that great depth that we like to see. I think that'll really serve us well against Texas. Just having that depth of like, oh, okay, we need to give a guy a break from it. Okay, put that guy in. 37 punts in 5 games. Now I know that was a quick jump, but it's right here in big. It's in big font on my outline to make sure that I make a big point of this. Oklahoma's defense has forced 37 punts in 5 games. Want to know how many points that Oklahoma's defense has allowed this season? 36. We've forced more punts than allowed points. That's 7.2 points per game. That's a touchdown a game. And 5 games. Okay, so that's a touchdown and then some. Touchdown and a field goal, maybe? Yeah. A little bit less than a field goal. Whatever we'd want to call it. Point is, this Oklahoma defense is for real. This is the promised land that Venables brought to us. Or this is the fulfillment of the promise and the vision that Brent gave us when he arrived at the end of the 2021 season, going into the 2022 spring process. This is what we've been waiting for. This Oklahoma team has allowed fewer points through 5 games than any other Oklahoma defense since, I think it was 1987. I saw that earlier today. This defense is for real. The front 7, fantastic. The secondary's doing great. Peyton Bowen and RJ looked great on Saturday as well. The whole unit is fantastic. And I'm so proud that we get to see an Oklahoma defense take the field like we did against Auburn with 4 minutes left on the clock, with a physically talented quarterback and 2 great wide receivers. And they had 4.5 minutes left. And we were able to sit back and say, we got this. We won't let them score. And we didn't. We went and pushed them back and got a safety. I will happily take a great defense and an adequate offense over a great offense and an adequate defense. Because we saw how that worked under Lincoln Riley, 2017, 2018, 2019. all those teams, great offenses, terrible defenses. When it came time to play in the big games like Georgia in the Rose Bowl, Alabama in the playoffs there as well, and 2019 LSU, although there was no stopping that offense ever. This defense is insane, and it is what we've been waiting for, and I'm so glad that we finally have one. Special teams. Grayson Miller's an absolute dog, absolute monster of a punter. Special teams since the Michigan game has really stepped up after those couple of muff punts and just issues there and roughing the kickers and everything. But this special teams unit is fantastic. Grayson Miller is quickly becoming a favorite of mine on the team. And the story that he told, I think it was during the bye week, about the hot air balloon with Oklahoma Sooners on it. And that was, in his mind, a sign that this is where he's supposed to be. And we are happy to have him. And to wrap out this game review, and we've actually run quite a while here, the reason that Oklahoma has dropped from 5 to 6, and I've seen a lot of people asking that question, why did Oklahoma move down and A&M move up? Because A&M's resume is objectively better than ours at this time. And I know a lot of Oklahoma fans might not like to hear that, but here's the reality. We have 2 Power 4 wins to hang our hat on, and Michigan is doing well in the Big Ten, but they're not dominating everybody. And Auburn, after their performance at A&M last week, I think everyone sees the writings on the wall that Auburn is not going to be very good this year. Meanwhile, Texas A&M is also 5-0, and they have wins over Notre Dame, whose only other loss, is a close loss to Miami, who's the number 2 ranked team and 5-0. Or is A&M 6-0? Actually, I may have messed up on that because they played a game on Saturday. So let's double check this. I need to make sure that I'm not lying to everyone here. Okay, no, Texas A&M is 5-0. Okay, I was worried there for a second that I had accidentally told a lie to everyone. And I also should have looked that one up. Forgive me, I just got back from Florida. So, put this outline together in a bit of a rush. But A&M's resume is just better because they beat Mississippi State at home. But Mississippi State was 4-1 going into that matchup, and their only loss was to Tennessee, who they took to overtime. Tennessee took it down to the wire against Georgia, who only lost to Alabama by 3. And Alabama did get manhandled by Florida State, but has since improved and shown out that they are a better overall team than people gave them credit for. And unfortunately got the win over Vanderbilt on Saturday, which breaks my heart because I was hoping for Vanderbilt to pull off the upset, even though I picked Alabama to win. So to wrap that little bit of the ranking out, I honestly think, looking at Texas A&M's schedule, and we are going to talk about A&M here a little bit, just still with the ranking bit, is that looking at the remainder of their schedule, there is not a single game that I look at A&M and say, oh, you're definitely losing that. The biggest question mark I have for them right now is at LSU. And that's a possibility just because it's Death Valley. And who knows, maybe LSU will show that they're a little bit more dominant going into that matchup here in a few weeks. All right, that wraps up the game review. All right, so 44-0. We're ranked number 6 in the country. We're 5-0 going into Red River, as we predicted in our preseason predictions. If you go over to our Instagram and check it out there at Wacko Sooners. Let's quickly talk about John Mateer and his injury status. So he was wearing a wrist cast on Saturday. He was in pads. He was warming up. He was throwing a little bit. It'll be a day-to-day thing. I think we'll just see how it all goes. And I know that we're a little bit late getting on this particular story. Chipotle-gate. Someone on the Texas A&M message board, Oklahoma Sooner Ag, according to their handle, said, "Howdy Ags, I have relevant news. Sooners quarterback John Mateer will play versus Texas. I was in Chipotle tonight in Norman, Oklahoma, and Mateer was in line in front of me. The tortilla presser asked Mateer how his hand was doing, and Mateer said, great. And then Mateer said, he is going to 100% going to play against Texas. Here's to hoping Mateer leads the Sooners to shut out the Horns," end quote. So, I don't know all of what's going on there. Because on the one hand, it's an A&M fan and an A&M message board with ties to Oklahoma hating on Texas, saying that Texas's worst nightmare, or what should be their worst nightmare, is going to be starting against them. Now, is John just talking to the fans and hyping it up, or is he actually serious? We don't know. Brent Venables was asked on Saturday after the game, Brent, if you go to Dallas and Mateer can't play, how do you feel about Hawkins? And the first thing Brent said was, I'm assuming he can't. And he ended the answer with, I feel great about Mike. So he clearly feels good about Mike. And at the same now his answer about Mateer specifically, I'm assuming he can't. Could that be gamesmanship, kind of manipulating Texas's preparation process this week? Prepare for 2 quarterbacks, prepare for 1. I honestly think nobody is going to know until kickoff on Saturday in Dallas whether or not John Mateer will play. Now, does that mean he's going to play the whole game? Does that mean he's going to start playing and feel just he can't do it and step out and Hawkins comes in? Does that mean he doesn't start at all? Does that mean he plays, gets injured again, and has to go out? We don't know. And I think we will not know until kickoff on Saturday. I would not be surprised by any of those outcomes. I personally would love it if John feels up to it and it's not at a massive risk of injuring him further to continue playing. I would love to see that. Again, time will tell. It will be a day-to-day thing. My money in a perfect world, if John is coming back, he will be listed as questionable. On the injury report that the SEC requires every team to release every week going into games. I'd love to see John listed as doubtful or questionable. Doubtful, honestly. Yeah, not even questionable. Doubtful. And then last minute we announce as the game starts that he is going to play. And I talked through my whole hype video idea last week. All right, our final segment of the day. Manning and Texas are not as advertised. Texas falls to Florida, 29-21 in the swamp. I was there. In the swamp. I was there pretty much on the 40, 45. And it was immaculate to watch as a Oklahoma fan and a certified Texas hater. Florida, 457 total yards, 298 pass, 159 rush. They had 22 first downs. They were 7 of 14 on third downs. They threw an interception and lost a fumble. And I will get to my favorite stat here in a little bit. Texas, 341 total yards, 289 pass, 52 rushing. With Arch Manning leading the charge with 37 of those 52 yards. Texas had 16 first downs. They were 3 of 11 on third down. Arch threw 2 interceptions. And this Texas offensive line, they gave up 6 sacks. Texas didn't look good. Arch, first of all, 16 of 29, 55.17 completion, 263 yards, 2 touchdowns, 15 carries, those 37 yards as Texas' leading rusher. And it looked like he didn't know exactly what he wanted to do. He didn't look particularly scared. He didn't look like Jackson Arnold in 2024, or Jackson Arnold. Well, actually, yeah, he didn't look like Jackson Arnold in 2024, and he didn't look like Jackson Arnold so far against SEC competition in 2025. He didn't look scared to make a decision. He just looked confused. And not even like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Just like, lacking hustle, not being totally sure of what he wanted to do. He overthrew perfectly wide open receivers several times yesterday, or Saturday, several times. And those missed throws, if he'd made those, probably would have changed the trajectory of the game and could have put Texas in position to score at least 10 plus more points, at least. However, and this is not all on Arch, mind you, because Arch, I think, did relatively well. I mean, he looked better against Florida than he did against Ohio State. And I think some of that is also because I think Florida's defense is not as good as Ohio State's. I think they're fairly comparable. But also, it's a 1-3 Florida team. And I remember talking to several Florida fans before the game. They were not terribly optimistic about the day. They hoped they would win. They thought it was possible. They didn't expect it to look like that. But Florida dominated Texas in the trenches on both sides of the ball. Texas' offensive line giving up 6 sacks. Florida's defense just doing their job, stuffing the run, forcing Arch to throw, forcing Sark to call throws with a quarterback that's not terribly comfortable in making those kinds of creative offensive plays that we have grown accustomed to seeing out of Steve Sarkisian during his tenure at Texas. But also the Texas defensive line, like they gave up 159 rushing yards. What? This was the number 2 ranked defense in the SEC coming into this weekend. And they gave up 160 on the ground and 300 through the air. Not great on third down. What? But yeah, Texas as a whole did not look disciplined. They weren't moving with hustle. They didn't have that aggressive killer instinct that I remember seeing in them in the last 2 years, 2023 and 2024. This did not look like the Steve Sarkisian team that I have grown accustomed to watching. It was sloppy. And the Florida fan sitting behind me, he said, Texas was looking at us as a look-ahead game. I honestly don't think they were, simply because the Swamp is a tough place to play. Texas knows that Florida has the roster and the capacity to do great things. They just had to put it together. And Steve Sarkisian knew his offense was not performing very well. So I think Steve Sarkisian really did put everything into this Florida game, and it just didn't work because of, I don't even know what reason. I think the Ohio State loss was a massive blow to morale. I think Arch's performance has been a massive blow to morale. I think the amount that your defense is allowed based on your cupcake games, they've allowed 17 points through 3 cupcake games. You'd think that those should be shutouts or 1 field goal at worst from those cupcake teams in San Jose State and UTEP. You did have a shutout against Sam Houston, but you allowed 7 from San Jose and 10 from UTEP. That shouldn't be happening with all of the money and resources that Texas has, with the pieces you brought in from the transfer portal. I guess this just goes to prove money is not necessarily everything. Because remember, during SEC Media Days, Sark was saying, if they're here for the money, we don't want them. They're not the kind of guys we need. Proceeds to have videos from summer recruiting where they meet the recruits in a lot full of Lamborghinis. Yeah, Texas has all the money in the world when it comes to NIL and just football resources in general. But when these little road bumps come up, the mercenaries are not going to give it their all, which I think is what's great about Oklahoma, looking at the culture at Oklahoma. We've gotten rid of every single guy that is not a 100% program guy. I say that and look at Jaden Ott, given my takes on him last week and opinions. Not every guy in the room. The jury is still not fully in the room when it comes to Jaden Ott. We'll see how it goes. But for the most part, Oklahoma's entire roster, every guy in that locker room is invested and cares less about the money and more about the home and the team and the community and the coaches and performing to a standard. The Texas team entirely on Saturday looked lazy. So now, as a result, well, actually, one more point I want to bring up about the laziness. Like the Florida defensive line did not race to DJ Lagway at all on Saturday. DJ Lagway had enough time to sit back in the pocket and write the great American novel of War and Peace by Tolstoy proportions. He could have written the great American novel and won a Pulitzer Prize back there. Texas is no longer ranked after this loss, nor should they be. Because their resume is 5 games, 3 wins over cupcakes, and 2 losses to the only Power 4 teams you've played. And both were very clear. So that makes me very happy that people are finally realizing, oh, Texas is not everything they were cracked up to be. Quinn Ewers, I owe you a massive apology, man. I've given Quinn Ewers a lot of crap over the last several years. I do think there is a reason why he fell so low in the draft, but he was better than Arch Manning. And I'm shocked. Now, granted, I was low on Quinn Ewers. I was also low on Arch Manning. So forget how I owe Quinn Ewers an apology. I'm still shocked how most everyone on earth was on the Arch Manning Heisman winner, best quarterback ever, second coming of Christ type of train, and did not stop to wonder and logically think, why did Sark not put in Arch Manning over Quinn Ewers if Arch Manning is really that dude that is supposed to save Texas football? Why? Because Arch Manning isn't better than Quinn Ewers. And I remember sitting here for 2 years before I started Wacko Sooners, for the 2 years that Arch has been in college so far. I remember sitting there saying to everyone, Arch Manning is very talented. I don't know if I just believe just yet the awesomeness that everyone has been predicting. I've been proven right. I will take handwritten apologies only from everyone that told me to stop talking and stop talking about football because Arch Manning was going to be great. I will take handwritten apologies, 300 words minimum. So this leads us into our initial thoughts for Red River. And I apologize that we've gone a little bit over time. We've had a lot to talk about today. But my initial thoughts for Red River coming out of this Florida-Texas matchup. Florida's rushing attack was rated 13th in the SEC going into this weekend. And they got 160 yards on the ground. Oklahoma's rushing attack going into this weekend was ranked 12th in the SEC. So Oklahoma's rushing attack was rated higher than Florida's going into week 6 of the 2025 season. And our passing attack we know is good. A lot of that does hinge on John Mateer. Because I think Michael Hawkins is capable. I think Mateer is the man that will carry us over the top and make it a clear victory. If I had to pick right now, I expect Oklahoma to beat Texas this Saturday, October the 11th, 2025, in the Cotton Bowl at the State Fair in Dallas, in the shadow of Big Tex. If I had to pick that right now, Florida's offensive and defensive lines had their way with Texas the entirety of Saturday. And we know that Oklahoma's defense is leading. We talked about the elite level that this defense has been playing on in our Wacko preview on Friday. This Oklahoma defense is the real deal. They're the best defensive line in the country. The 3 deep in the front 7 is phenomenal. The 2 deep in the secondary is phenomenal. And they have the best defensive mind in the sport calling the plays and scheming that elite unit to success and playing lights out and allowing 7.2 points per game, forcing 37 punts and only allowing 36 points in those first 5 games. This defense is the real deal. This is the Oklahoma defense that Brent Venables had with us in the 2000s before he left for Clemson, after the whole debacle of Bob Stoops just cashing all in on big offenses because the Big 12 was easy to win that way. This defense will have its way with Texas. I had someone in our TikTok comment sections earlier today yelling at me about, oh, that's a stupid thing to say. If Texas shows up the way they did against Florida, oh, that's a stupid thing to say. They had a bad day. They've had all 5 games that Texas has played, they've looked not great. And it's not unreasonable for me to sit here and see that Texas is not performed well in any of their performances, really. Sam Houston being, I guess, somewhat of an exception, but you're expected to do that anyways. I don't think it's unreasonable for me to sit here and say I have not seen them show up completely. Therefore, I'm not going to expect them to show up completely. I'm going to expect them to not show up again. Now, I expect, because it's a rivalry, Texas will still do its best. I don't think that best is going to be enough. I think this Oklahoma defensive line is going to kill Arch Manning. Not literally, but they're going to dominate him. They're going to go after him. They're going to rip him apart. And again, the victory, the amount of confidence I have in victory, period, comes down to John Mateer or Michael Hawkins. I think with Michael Hawkins, it'll be a fair fight. I think with John Mateer, it is, I'm not going to say almost a certainty because I don't want to jinx it, but I think victory with John Mateer is far more likely than it is with Michael Hawkins. This Oklahoma defense will massacre this below average Texas offense. And I am looking forward to it because I don't see this being a nail biter like 2023. I see this not necessarily being on a blowout scale of 2022 or 2024, but I see this on being a clear Oklahoma victory. In the event that Oklahoma wins, I see this being a clear victory. And I've not seen one of those in my tenure attending the Cotton Bowl here at the State Fair in October. Well, Sooner Nation, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the WhackoReview Podcast, where we break down all things OU football coming out of the previous weekend. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell button so you never miss an episode. Remember, you can also follow us on all of our socials, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter X, all at Wacko Sooners for live news updates, game time highlights, and a few reels and memes to keep it lighthearted and fun like we like it here in Sooner Nation. Go hit those follows so you're always in the Wacko loop. We will see you on Wednesday for our Wacko Weekly podcast, 8 a.m. Central Time this Wednesday. Love to have y'all here. So grateful that you join in the Wacko loop. Boomer! Sooner.